Hi again, Mark here from talkingbass.net. This is another in the series of lessons on music theory, and today we're going to be having a quick look at the chromatic scale. Now, when we look at major or minor keys, the major and minor scales that we use to make up all the melodies and chords within those keys are called diatonic. So when we look at the key of C major, the C major scale is the diatonic scale. So it pretty much means in key, okay? So any notes that don't belong in that scale are called chromatic. So if we take the key of C major, that C major scale there is the diatonic scale, and all the notes in there, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, they're all diatonic to that key of C major. The notes C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, and B flat or A sharp are all chromatic in relation to that key of C major. Now, a chromatic scale is a scale made up of every one of the 12 notes from any note to its octave. So it's a 12-note or dodecaphonic scale. You can also see this as a scale made up solely of semitones. So we can see that really easily on a bass guitar neck by taking a note like C, here at the 3rd fret of the A string, and then just playing every note or fret right up to the next C on that same string up here, at the 15th fret. So we've got C here, 3rd fret, C here, 15th fret, and we just play every note in between. So C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and then we're to C. Okay, so I just went up there, it's playing every single fret, 1, 2, 3, 4, with the finger in 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Okay, every note from C to C, that's the chromatic scale. So a chromatic scale is basically made up of every note on the neck, and we just label it, you know, like C chromatic scale or D chromatic scale, just according to the note that we've started on. So an A chromatic scale would go like this, just because we started and finished on the A. B flat, because I started and ended on B flat. Okay, so they're all chromatic scales. Every note, I mean, I could play any note on the neck is a part of a chromatic scale, and like I say, we just label it according to the starting note or tonic. Now, as per usual, we need to see how the chromatic scale works across the neck as opposed to just going up and down. And because of the notes involved, we have lots of different patterns to choose from and loads of possible different fingerings. So a really popular one looks like this. Okay, so I'm just taking that C there, 8th fret of the E string, and then I'm just playing a 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern with the fingers. So we've got C, C sharp, D, D sharp there. 1, 2, 3, 4 with the fingers. And then we move up onto the next string and down a fret, which gives us there that E, F, F sharp, G. So, and then we just take that same pattern again, up a string, down a fret, which gives us the G sharp, the A sharp, and the B, which then leaves us there leads us up to the C. So all together. So it's a very simple pattern there of 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'd repeat with the first finger there. So we could, which makes it easy for playing 2-octave chromatic scales. Now, that's not exactly the perfect scale pattern for coming up and down in 1 octave, obviously, because we have to jump up to the first finger or slide the little finger there to hit the octave. So what you can do, just to make this a little bit easier, is play that same pattern. And then when we get to that G sharp there, we can slide up to the A there, leaving us with that 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern again, which leads us to the 4th finger there for the octave, which means it's a lot easier to come down. So again, we start there, 8th fret of the E string there for the C, 1, 2, 3, 4 with the finger, up a string down, up a string, down a fret, slide up, and there we are at the end. And then when we come down, C, B, B flat, A, slide down, jump down to the G. Okay, so Okay, so that's the whole chromatic scale there, working across. As per usual, we need to practice that from different tonics or root notes. So let's take an A there, 5th fret of the E string, and then use that same pattern. Or why not try a C sharp? Try there. Or we could try a C sharp there on the starting on the A string. Now, as I've mentioned before, there's loads of different ways of playing a chromatic scale, and I do actually have my own preference for playing this chromatic scale, and it's a pattern that I think has a much more useful appearance visually on the neck, because it looks a little bit more like a major scale in the starting on the 2nd finger, but you'll see what I mean when I go through it. So this is my fingering for a chromatic scale, and I've not actually seen this used that often, so it might be just my fingering. So try it out, see what you think. So we've got starting on the 2nd finger there for the C, then we play the C sharp and the D, and that's all we do on that 1st string. So we've got C, C sharp, D, 2nd finger, 3rd finger, 4th finger. Then we move up onto the next string, so we go to the E flat there with the 1st finger. And then we slide that up to the E. So this is like what we did with the last pattern on the next string up. So we've got, and then we just played that 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern on fingering wise. So far we've got C, C sharp, D, E flat there, slide up to the E, F, F sharp, G. Then we move up to the G sharp or A flat there, and then slide up again, and then we're up to the octave, and then we can come down using exactly the same fingering. Okay, so all together. So that's a C chromatic scale using my 2nd finger pattern there. Now you may be thinking to yourself, why come up with a weird looking pattern like that? Because the original chromatic scale pattern I showed you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, is, falls under the hands a lot easier. And it's definitely a lot more common that people use them. Well, as common as a chromatic scale can be, really, because they're not that common. But this pattern that I've come up with is more related to dominant 7 arpeggios. Now, dominant 7 arpeggios, you get a lot of chromatic movement around them. You get chromatic movement, all over the place with majors and minor 7s, but dominant 7s, you do get a lot more chromatic movement, but partly because of the kind of bluesy aspect of it. So you get that kind of sharp 4 thing. That in itself is a chromatic note. You get the minor 3rd to major 3rd. There's the minor 3rd to the major 3rd. So you also get this kind of thing. Moving up through that kind of pattern. Now that pattern, the chromatic pattern that I've shown you, looks visually a lot more like that dominant 7 pattern. So it's a lot easier to relate that chromatic scale to a framework of an arpeggio, in this case the dominant 7. Okay, because instinctively 9 times out of 10 you would probably go for a dominant 7 chord starting on that 2nd finger there, C, E, G, B flat, C there. You can play it there starting on the 1st finger, or you could start it on the 4th finger there, but they are less common. 9 times out of 10, like I say, you will probably find people going for it starting on that 2nd finger there. So if we play through that chromatic scale again, I'm starting on that 2nd finger just like that dominant 7 arpeggio, coming up, minor 3rd to major 3rd, and then I'm in position to come up. That is filling in the gaps basically on that dominant 7 arpeggio. Then flat and 6th or sharp and 5th there, sliding up back into that pattern again. Okay, so like I say, visually it relates a lot more to a dominant 7th chord, which in itself makes it a little bit more practical. So as I mentioned earlier, there are actually loads of different ways of playing this that one I've just shown you is, you know, probably my preferred one these days. But you can start them on a fourth finger, or you could play them up 2 strings there. You know, there's literally hundreds of ways of playing this, especially considering there's so many notes in there. You know, you could play, you know, loads and loads of different ways. So it's always worth bearing that in mind and trying to practice them in different positions. You know, don't just stick to one particular position. Now, one last thing that's worth understanding if you're ever going to be writing chromatic lines down on actual paper or sitting any music theory exams is that there are actually 2 forms of chromatic scale. There's the melodic chromatic and the harmonic chromatic. Now, this normally prompts a look of, how can there be 2 different scales when they're both containing the exact same notes? Well, it's all to do with the spelling of the scales. The pitches themselves are the same in both scales, but the note names can be written down differently. The harmonic chromatic scale is the same in both ascending and descending directions, and it ties in more with chordal use, which is why it's called a harmonic chromatic scale. And it's much easier to describe it by intervallic construction, by the numbers. So if you think about a C major scale, and think of the intervals within it, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You know, there's no flats in there, flat 7, flat 3 like we would have in minor scales. All of those are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, the harmonic chromatic scale uses those, and then we just have variations on the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 6th, and the 7th. The root and the 5th stay as they are. We don't have a sharp 1 or a flat 1, and we don't have a sharp 5 or a flat 5, just 1, 1, and 1, 5. Now, as I ascend through this, it'll make more sense. So, in terms of the numbers, we would have 1, flat 2, 2, flat 3, 3, 4, sharp 4, 5, flat 6, 6, flat 7, 7. And then we're back to 1, okay? So out of all those numbers, 1 and 5 remains consistent. There's no other sharps or flats, you know, there's only 1 1 and only 1 5. The rest of them are all the alterations. So if we then turn that into note names, we've got from C, we've got C, then D flat, not C sharp, D flat, because that's flat 2, D flat, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, sharp 4 there, G, which is the 5th, so we only have one type of G, there's no sharp, G sharp or G flat, then A flat, A, B flat, B. So again, as I'm coming up through there, C, D flat, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, A flat, A, B flat, B, and then back to C. And like I mentioned before, this ties in more with chord construction than it does anything else, which is why it's called the harmonic chromatic scale. The melodic chromatic scale is more to do with melody and direction. The melodic chromatic scale is different in ascending and descending, and that's all to do with melodic direction, and it's quite easy to understand really, even though there isn't a different ascending and descending, which, how can that be easier? But bear with me. So when we ascend, we sharpen, when we descend, we flatten. Simple as that. So when we go up through the notes, we've got C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. Okay? Then when we descend, we've got C, B, B flat, A flat, G, G flat, F, E flat, D, D flat, C. So sharps in ascent, flats in descent. Easy. So I mentioned that the harmonic chromatic is more suited to chords and harmony, and the melodic chromatic is more suited to melody. And that's easier to see when you think of it in a practical application. So if you think of a chord with a chromatic alteration in there, so let's say a C7 flat 9. So that's basically a C7 chord with a flattened 9th in there, so a D flat, so a flattened 2nd, let's say. So we've got a D flat in there. Now, if that chord was being moved around and it had, we wanted to transpose the tune, you don't want to be changing that extension to a sharpened 1, let's say, depending on whether we were moving up or down in the melody above it. You know, you don't want, you know, that D flat is going to be a D flat. It's a flat 9 as part of the chord, not a sharp 1. So it's going to be a D flat, not a C sharp. So that's where that harmonic chromatic scale comes into play. The melodic chromatic scale, if we've got a chromatic line moving up, E, F, F sharp, G, it makes more sense to sharpen when we move up and flatten when we come down, even just from a straight visual reading sense. So if you're playing up through there, it wouldn't make as much sense if they're all flats moving up and then sharps on the way down. It could be quite confusing. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, but even just from a practical reading sense, it makes more sense to sharpen on the way up and flatten on the way down, okay? So that's the harmonic chromatic and melodic chromatic. Harmonic chromatic, used for chords, stuff like that. Melodic chromatic, for use in melodies, line, whatever type of line, bass lines, anything like that. So, even though I've just spent some time discussing the difference between the harmonic and melodic versions of this scale, in a practical sense, for most bass players, these differences rarely need to be addressed, okay? You're very, very rarely going to be asked about the melodic or the harmonic version of a chromatic scale. And to be honest, there's probably a hell of a lot of musicians out there that have never even heard of them. It's mainly to do with how we write scales down or describe them in terms of note names, you know, the spellings of them. But if you, you know, it is important to know that if you're going to be describing them or writing them down, and certainly if you're going to be sitting music theory exams. But for now, you know, in a practical sense, just learn to play these things. So check out talkingbass.net for more lessons, articles and downloads, and subscribe to receive the free scale reference guide, which is full of loads of scales just like this one for you to practice. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've enjoyed it, and please leave a comment if you've got any questions or just want to say hello. Okay? See you later!